Want to find your seat for the event of your choice but can't get one that fits your desire or your budget? Well, my friends, SeatGeek has you covered. SeatGeek is the official sponsor of the Snake Sports Talk Show. With a list of over hundreds of events to choose from, SeatGeek will assure you that you won't miss your seat with the amazing view of your choice at the most affordable price. Whether it's looking for your best seat in the house of your favorite sports team, finding live concerts that get you closer to your favorite artist, or enjoying your spot at your favorite live shows, comedies, and more, SeatGeek has it all just for you. Go online to SeatGeek.com or download the app on your mobile device through Google Play and the App Store. And as a special offer before checkout, use promo code SNAKESPORTS and save yourself $20 off of your purchase of your first ticket and experience why SeatGeek is the most trusted ticketing app for your next event. Remember, that's SeatGeek.com and download the app on your phone with promo code SNAKESPORTS for $20 off and find your seat with SeatGeek.
And now, broadcasting live from Las Vegas, the Snake Sports Talk Show with Jake Silva starts now.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, here we go on what I believe was a manic Monday, but it's a fun Monday nonetheless here on the Snake Sports Talk Show, wherever and however you may be watching and listening. Thanks for making us a part of your lovely evening. My co-host, of course, who is ready, you can see from his Cleveland Browns attire because he's ready for the segment we got at the bottom half of the hour here on the Snake Sports Talk Show. We're live all over Roku, iHeartRadio, and all social media platforms known to man. We've got a special treat for all of you guys, for all Oilers and Ranger fans up out there far and wide. Nick Zereris is going to be joining us here up on the show in a couple minutes. I'm excited to know what's going to happen with the Edmonton Oilers. They had a fine off-season from coming through, in free agency, and we'll see what the roster really looks like, the New York Rangers as well. Chase, how are you feeling, man? Because honestly, look, I have been battling with a lot of people from my hometown on Twitter, and usually I don't engage this way, but I'm excited for Thursday's show on this one because I got to tap in, man. But yeah, it's been a crazy, crazy day today.
I want to start off first. Do I sound okay, or am I getting a little echo?
I think you sound fantastic. Definitely got the microphone and everything working.
So I'm trying to fix it.
Yeah.
But no, I'm very excited for the upcoming sporting events like the Home Run Derby, the All-Star Game, obviously. Then training camp starts here shortly in the next couple weeks and everything, and I'm getting excited for that, and I cannot wait. And then we're gonna start getting into the meat of summer with baseball. When you start the last 2.5 months after the All-Star break is when they get the big push, and it really sets the teams apart from which ones are the best and which ones are, just going to be a first round exit.
Yeah, I'll tell you, man. I mean, it's going to be really, really interesting, and especially when I look at the NBA season. So this is what I'll start with here. Nick Zereris joining us here in about 5 minutes. So here's one of the things that I want to be honest about here, because one team in particular that I think is going to be really interesting to watch through this up-and-coming season, that's the Philadelphia 76ers. So Paul George came on in free agency, and the thing that was sold was Daryl Morey basically gave him a guarantee that he could not end up turning down because there's a potential extension involved. So what was the things that they needed to do? Get him at least a contract that was well worth the while, and seeing how the chemistry really pans out for the Sixers. I think they are definitely going to be my favorite team to watch this up-and-coming season because the Eastern Conference was weak last year, but yet the Boston Celtics were clearly the better team in all of the NBA. They got another title, But I think now the Eastern Conference is starting to become very, very competitive again. But I think a lot of this has to deal with that the Sixers learned from a lot of their mistakes in the past. Some of that was their draft picks clearly did not end up hitting as much as most fans expected them to, from Markelle Fultz to Jahlil Okafor to many others. And they were very injury prone. But the other thing of it was, too, is there was no sounding leader in the locker room. That was much the reason why some of their important pieces left. Drew Holiday, Jimmy Butler, multiple players, because this whole Ben Simmons fiasco from just, how was he going to feel one day to the next? Now, again, I do think he is a fine defensive player. I do hope that he succeeds later on because, look, any kid who works out twice as hard that wants to get into the NBA in their career, and that's their journey road, would absolutely die to have a chance like this. So I'm just hoping that Ben Simmons doesn't screw this up for the remainder of his career. I hope he doesn't. I think he's very much a refined defensive player. But the Sixers have been such an oddball story for the last few seasons. And I think Daryl Morey, when he came in out of Houston, came into this front office and said, listen, this is a circus show that we've been dealing with for the last few years. I want to make it right. We want to win, and we want to win right now. You've got Joel Embiid that despite the injuries that he's already suffered in his career, he's an outstanding player. Definitely gives you rebounds, gives you defense, gives you much-needed points, but he needs help. But the lucky thing is that the Sixers hit on is that they got Tyrese Maxey, a very hyper-scoring type of guard, and a guy that I think you could very much surround with in the next 5 to 7 years, potentially. So you've got that. You've also got some very good role players, whether they are, the sixth man on the roster or coming off the bench, that's going to give you points, give you minutes, give you something. And not only that, but the Sixers also signed Caleb Martin. So what is that telling you? We want to be physical. We want to be hyper-aggressive on offense. And what we just saw from Boston this past season, with as deep as they were with the bigs that they had, and you had Derek White and you had multiple other players that can shoot and give you points and keep the padded lead on your side, they want to compete with that. And you've already seen the Knicks go all in on their chips, getting Mikal Bridges, because now they have 4-star players. They bring back OG Anunoby. It's an interesting team, and I think this is a team that's well worth wanting to get into the Eastern Conference Final. We shall see what next season looks like. But I think the Sixers are definitely not a team to play around with this time, and I feel confident sitting on this chair behind this microphone saying that. And I think the Sixers, after these last few years, from what we got, I think this is a better Sixer team than what I would have predicted when Brett Brown was a coach, when you had Ben Simmons and Tobias Harris. I think this is a much better, refined Sixer team. They're going to make some noise. I think now you finally give Joel Embiid, the absolute star, who was a supporting cast, a guy who gives you defense on the wing, and he does not have to feel the pressure than what he felt with the Clippers, because you had an unreliable and unavailable Kawhi Leonard. You also had a not so hyper-aggressive scorer this time around now in his prime in James Harden, and they're probably going to end up trading away Russell Westbrook from what it sounds like at this point. So I think Paul George is in a better situation this time, and I think now, because you got some competition with the Pacers getting better, the Knicks getting better, the Magic are getting better. I think now there's about 5 to 6 teams in the Eastern Conference that's well worth watching. So I'm excited for it. And I think now the Sixers have finally figured it out. Paul George voiced about it early on. And the other thing about this is he said he wants to really be the kind of culture setter for this Philadelphia organization, which is a good thing. That's what you want. So I think the Sixers will be much better this year. They are my team that I feel like between them, the Knicks, and the Celtics, I think their window of a potential finals appearance could be there, but I'm only going to get them as close to the Eastern Conference Final to be fair, because there are many teams that can compete to getting into the to getting into the finals. But when you think about a team that is very competitive, that the continuity and the chemistry looks strong with this organization, you can make a case that they could be an Eastern Conference Finals appearance type team. It's a fun season, I think, for next season, but it'll be interesting to see how this chemistry really gels compared to a lot of teams that we're seeing right now currently. So joining us, the Edmonton Oilers, fresh from an appearance in the Stanley Cup Final, which I was very happy for because I love Connor McDavid and I love a lot of their pieces. But not only does he speak about the Oilers, but he speaks about the Rangers. So joining us here on the Via Global, the satellite network presented by StreamYard, Nick Zeri's joining us here up onto the show. So let's start with what we have gotten with the Edmonton Oilers. I mean, this was kind of a magical season to say for what they've done because I absolutely love their head coach in Knobloch. I think he's definitely figured this out and refined this organization. So recapping what this season was, because to be honest, I didn't trust their goaltending. I thought that was going to be a challenge moving into this thing, but they've defied the odds. So when you think about it, with the confidence level they're going into this now up and coming season, I mean, it's pretty strong to say that, right?
Oh, absolutely. I think your big concern, if you're an Oilers fan right now, is not having a letdown because you had such a good season. Everybody loves your offseason, too. The decisions you've made, bringing in Skinner, bringing in Arvidsson, trading for Matthew Savoie. Everybody's kind of head over heels with all the decisions over the last 2 weeks. They do have some stuff to figure out. They're still over the salary cap right now, whether or not Evander Kane will be on the team next year, whether or not Cody Ceci, Brett Kulak. They're going to have to make at least one more, if not two more roster decisions to get cap compliant by the start of next season. But on paper, yeah, this is easily going to be the most talented team of the McDavid era. The goaltending questions, I still think are valid. You know, remember Jack Campbell did start the year as their starter last year, and he was so bad that he had to go down to the AHL, and Skinner eventually worked it out. Then you remember, of course, he got pulled for games 4 and 5 of the second round series against Vancouver, where they went to Calvin Pickard for 2 games and then went back to Skinner. And then after that, Skinner was fine. The big question is, can you stay healthy? Because that's been an issue for them at points over the last few years. And just getting to the playoffs in one piece. You know, the Oilers, for a lot of the last few years, they've gotten to a first or a second. They've gotten through the first round against the Kings 3 years in a row now. But you think about that series against Colorado 2 years ago, extremely injured, not really. You weren't going to beat a Colorado team that already kind of had the team of destiny look. Last year, you ran into a wall against Vegas. You were pretty dinged up. This year, they stayed pretty healthy. You know, Evander Kane missed 5 games. They definitely missed guys at various points for a game or two. Adam Henrique only played 15 of the 25 playoff games, but they have more than enough talent. And unfortunately in hockey, having talent isn't necessarily the precursor. You know, good teams lose in the playoffs. It's just kind of the nature. You look at that Vegas-Dallas first-round series from this past season where Vegas very well could have won that, and I wouldn't have been surprised if Vegas was playing Edmonton in the conference final.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it was interesting, you know, with how everything played out. But, you know, what's funny, though, another case that you could also make, too, was the sweep that they had basically been given against the Winnipeg Jets. That was another one that I thought was a big-time pill to swallow. And you could tell from Connor McDavid just how frustrating that is because he wants to get there. He wants to win. And, you know, and it's one of those things. So thinking of Connor McDavid, because I was very happy that he made it into the Stanley Cup final. I really was, because he's such a polarizing player. And you listen, when you get a polarizing player like that, who's just that damn good at his position, and let alone just that damn good on the ice, I mean, you're hoping he gets to the big stage. Now my next wish, hopefully in baseball, that I get to see Mike Trout in the World Series, because at that point, we finally got what we wanted, all as sports fans, for loving it and watching it as much as we do. But I felt like, and a lot of people have kind of gone back and forth with the Conn Smythe Trophy, and here's my defense for Connor McDavid. You were never going to get another player who's just that polarizing and yet had a great postseason all the way around. I understand that, like, you don't want to give it to a guy who's on a losing team. I get that. But still, out of respect for him, he's going to win one eventually. That is one trophy in his trophy case he has yet to win. So your thoughts on him getting the Conn Smythe trophy? Because to be honest, I wasn't really mad at it at all. I felt like you're getting the best player in overall in the Stanley Cup playoffs that I felt was very deserving of a trophy like this.
Absolutely agree with you in that respect of it's for the entire playoffs. If it was just the finals MVP, sure, you could make an argument for guys on Florida based on the criteria of the award. And that doesn't mean a whole lot. NHL awards aren't always voted on by the letter of the law. Like last year, Erik Karlsson won the Norris, even though the definition is the best all-around defenseman, and he was like a -28. So voting on the awards is always subjective. The criteria to be a panelist to vote on the award. But McDavid was undoubtedly the best player in the playoffs. When you're breaking records where the only people ahead of you are Gretzky and Lemieux, you had a special postseason. And he was genuinely great in the Vancouver series. He was really good in the Dallas series. You would have liked more from him in the final itself, but he had the 2 4-point games and got them to a game 6 and a game 7. So I understand from the perspective that you probably want to give the award to someone on a winning team. But who on Florida was more deserving? That's really the issue there, is that Florida, you would have probably said Bobrovsky, but they got shelled in those 2 games, and that kind of left a bad taste in people's mouth. And then nobody else on Florida really put up any crazy counting stats. Nobody had 11 points in 7 games, 15 points in 7 games. So I think it probably was a case of those guys kind of splitting the vote from each other, and McDavid kind of a slam dunk, in all honesty. As soon as they got to a game 7, I thought it was a guarantee he was going to win the award. I mean, that was the conversation going into game 6, let alone game 7, that if they just got there, I think he had done enough. And he did. Obviously, he wanted to win the cup a lot more. Winning that individual trophy is nice, but a guy like that, he can win the individual awards. It's not about that at this point. He's 9 years in. He's only been to the playoffs 5 of the 9 years. They've only been past the second round twice in those 9 years. It's really hard to get there.
Yeah, I mean, here's the funny thing is that, even Tyler Seguin said it best with the Dallas Stars. It is a damn hard trophy to really hoist up, because that's all of the weight from just you're getting your ass kicked on a daily basis, getting checked, getting pushed, like all those things. But I like I said, I just think the competitive nature, it felt like it was right. I made a comment, and I'd like your thought on this, because I felt like this Oilers team, it felt a lot like the Oilers from the 80s, but the difference was we had no Grant Furr in this roster. I felt like that was the difference maker. You know what I mean? Can you elaborate on that? I mean, I just felt like that was the kind of Oilers team I got from, this team this year.
Energy-wise, style-wise, tempo, skill, incredible amounts of skill. Any team that has 2 of the 5 best players in the world, like Edmonton does, it's going to jump off the screen, even if you're a casual hockey fan. I more than one occasion during the playoffs hanging out with my friends and just throwing on the Oilers. And every now and then they're just looking up and like, oh, he does. Yeah, he does that like every play. Every single time McDavid's out there, he looks that much better than everybody else. But I would say I don't think Skinner was the problem. I do think he could have been better at points. If he's a little bit better in maybe game 1 or game 2, that series has a very different complexion. But as far as why they didn't win overall, I would say the defense is probably more of a culprit than Skinner himself. Of course, if you have a borderline Hall of Famer like Grant Fuhr or somebody like a Bobrovsky or Shesterkin, that always helps. You always want to have as much talent as possible. But I didn't feel like Skinner really failed them in that series in a way that he almost did in the Vancouver series. He played really well in the Dallas series and pretty much from game 4, 5, and 6. He was great in that series. Game 1, he wasn't great against Florida, but that wasn't really that first goal he concedes is tough, but you need to score. That's really the reason I won't blame Skinner that much for the final is they only had 1 goal through the first 2 games. And then you go into game 3, you work your way back into the game. You're down, I think 4-1, they get it to 4-3. They had plenty of chances. I don't think Skinner is the big culprit. If I had to point at somebody, I would say you probably needed more from Nurse and CC, but you got to a game 7, you lost by 1 goal. You had a chance. There's been more than one time where I've blinked and I've seen that look where McDavid had the puck one-on-one with Bobrovsky. And I think it was Brandon Montour jammed his stick and he just couldn't get anything on it. The net was open. It happens. This is a hard sport.
No, it is. And it's very competitive to, at the very least, because again, like I said, when you go into the Stanley Cup playoffs, it is a totally different beast that you're dealing with because there are many, many teams out there. I felt like it was very exciting this year because we got a lot more teams and we're very competitive. And I felt like we're the right fits. So fast forwarding into now this offseason when you talked about offense. So here we go. Jeff Skinner and now Victor Arvidsson. So they bring these guys in. I felt like Edmonton is kind of doing this thing with what Florida did this trade deadline. They've added offense. They've added much needed offense that I felt like they were missing from last year's Cup appearance. Do you feel like now adding in this offense, this kind of now meshes in what they kind of were missing in the most pivotal point, in the Cup final?
I think stylistically, yes. I think that was more of the issue than not having the type of talent, because obviously you get to a Stanley Cup final, you're a talented team, but someone like Arvidsson, who's got 50 to 60 point potential, doesn't need to be on your power play to still put up good stats, who forechecks well, who cycles well. And then you had Skinner, who's got 6 30-goal seasons, who not the most, we can be honest, Skinner's a one-dimensional player. He's going to skate in a straight line and he's going to put the puck on the net. That in a supporting role, whether it's on your second or third line, he's not going to get on your first power play. Those are quality pieces. And the most important thing, they weren't expensive and they didn't have to give either guy a ton of term. Skinner's 1 year, Arvidsson's 2. That was the most important thing for the Oilers in free agency, was finding quality depth. They had to subtract. They did have to trade Ryan McLeod. They got a nice piece in return for him in Silva, who may or may not be an NHL player this year. That's debatable, but they made a conscious decision that we can get more skilled. We can get a little bit more talented. And the reason I like Arvidsson slightly more than Skinner as far as fit is the forecheck and the cycle. That was something that Edmonton really struggled with at times in that final against Florida, because when Florida got going in that series, they were reducing those games to ugly rock fights, 20, 25 shots on goal each team per game, when these teams are usually high 30s, low 40s in today's NHL. So when there's fewer chances and you have to grind it out for offense, it's a lot harder to do that when you're used to playing the way Edmonton does, where it's up and down, defense to offense quickly. Now you add someone like Arvidsson, who's really good on the cycle, who's good at forechecking, and has a little bit of offense to his game. I do think he's probably a slightly better fit there for that spot than, say, a Vander Kane or maybe Nugent Hopkins or Warren Fogle.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see, what hopefully that the Oilers, what they do this next up and coming season, where they picked up off at. Because I just look at this whole Western Conference, it is very competitive. I mean, Nashville's going all in. Dallas, is big on defense, especially with just their identity. But there are other teams like Vancouver ended up grabbing, a couple really good quality players. But it'll be interesting to see what next year really just looks like for them. And I think this is still a playoff team, but now the competition is just getting heated more and more as I keep seeing the Western Conference. So shifting now to the New York Rangers, and a side note, family members of mine living in New York and Long Island, and we've seen from one of your posts up in Stony Brook News, love Stony Brook, absolutely love it. So the Rangers, I'm not disappointed this season. I felt like this team really clicked on a lot of cylinders, but it is hard when the fact that you've got the President's Trophy on your shoulders and you're trying to do with what the Chicago Blackhawks did in the past. But I felt like the competition against Florida was clear. They had more depth. They were the team that was hungry and aggressive. So when you look at what the Rangers season was this year, I can't be disappointed. I think they definitely turned a lot of heads. This was a team that I felt like really kind of got all in, but it just, it kind of got all the way to the end, and then that was the ending result.
It's a hard one because, like you said, the Rangers very clearly were a good team in the regular season, but I think the Rangers' issue this year, like it's been a number of times over the last 10 to 15 years, is their roster is really built well for the regular season. You can win in the regular season with elite goaltending and special teams. The Rangers have consistently run into this issue, whether it was with Henrik Lundqvist or over the last 3 years, where they've eventually gotten to a playoff series where they need one of their star players to be the best guy on the ice. And it's really hard to win when that's a goalie. You think about who the Rangers have come up short against in the last few years. This past year against Florida, Panarin, Zibanejad, Kreider, you're going to take Barkov, Kachuk, Verhaeghe, whichever third Florida forward you prefer. 2 years ago against the Devils, Jack Hughes had 100 points, was a Hart Trophy finalist 2 years ago. You would probably take Hughes, Heischer, and then probably Bratt over Zibanejad, Trocheck, and Kreider or Panarin. And then 3 years ago against the Tampa team that lost to Colorado, same deal. You're going to take Stamkos, Kucherov, Point over the Rangers guys. And that's not a knock, but that's been the Rangers' issue the last handful of seasons is they're good and the bar in the conference final and the cup final is great. I don't know if the Rangers would have fared particularly well against Edmonton. I do think the Rangers know the limitations of their roster, and it's why they've tried to orient the team around goaltending and defense, because they know they don't have forwards who are particularly adept at 5-on-5, working the cycle, and kind of playing the ugly game that Florida did so well this year.
Yeah, it was interesting. And the one thing that I looked at, and Peter Laviolette came in, and this was my honest response before the season started, was I felt like I wasn't sure how this Ranger team was going to come off of knowing that they fired Gerard Gallant, who I know is a hyper-aggressive type of offensive guy, but the thing that really knocks him the most is this puck and go stuff. But then where's my defense? That's the thing that I kind of get scared of the most. I've seen this with Vegas. I've seen this now with the Rangers. And again, it didn't really pan out well. Yes, you got an Eastern Conference appearance out of it, but then it was like against the Devils, they looked so marginalized. So in comes Peter Laviolette. And I felt like this team was going to take a step back from what they had, but yet he proved me wrong this year. So when you look at how Peter Laviolette really managed this group, did you spot this identity change? And how would you best describe it, how Peter Laviolette really took this team versus from what we got from Gerard Gallant?
The defense was a lot better at transitioning to offense quickly. And that ultimately, ironically, was their undoing against Florida, is that Florida was just better. That Florida's forecheck was just that much better than the Rangers' ability to break out. 2 years ago, the season they lost to the Devils in the first round, they really did not take that regular season seriously. They knew they were going to be a playoff team. The effort wasn't very consistent. The forecheck and the cycle were not very consistent. The 5-on-5 play in general was pretty bleh most of the year. They waited around till the deadline. They added Tarasenko. They added Kane. Neither of those guys particularly gelled well with the guys that were already here. They moved a lot around to accommodate both Kane and Tarasenko, and it never really looked right. And they got to that series against the Devils, who were faster, and the Devils just outworked them. They won loose pucks. They cycled them into oblivion, and the Devils just won foot races. Under Laviolette in the regular season, they really did a nice job of keeping their game simple. And most importantly, the biggest difference is that they had one of the best lines in hockey this year. Panarin, Lafreniere, and Trocheck were outstanding in the regular season. Panarin took almost twice as many shots this past season as he did the year before, and that unlocked so much more for Trocheck and Lafreniere. Trocheck took, I think, about 100 shots more than he did the season before. Lafreniere about 100 shots more than the season before. When you have a line that is driving possession that strongly, everything else can flow off of it. There's been a struggle here for a few years of, is that the first line, or is whoever Kreider, Zibanejad, and whoever the right wing is the first line? They answered the question this year. Panarin, 49 goals, 120 points, was fourth in the Hart Trophy voting. They were right there. They really had a line that was able to drive the boat. Their third line wasn't very good counting stats-wise, but they could control play, slow the game down, and cycle. The Rangers just needed a little diversification. They had all that skill on the team 2 years ago. They Kane, Tarasenko, Zibanejad, Kreider, Trocheck, Panarin. It didn't really work because all of those guys were kind of doing the same thing. This past year, a little bit more well-rounded, a little bit more focus on the fundamentals, cycling the puck, working for offense, as opposed to just asking your star players to make plays.
Yeah, and like I said, I just think that All it had to take was it had to just take moving a needle to really kind of make this team mesh and work, because I know they've got the offense. And I felt like, yeah, I agree with you. I felt like the defense looked a lot better. I think you got the best look of Igor Shesterkin that we've seen at netminder. And I just think if he capitalizes next season with the season he had, I think you could definitely make a case that the Rangers are definitely going to be a problem in the Eastern Conference for the next couple of years. Now, the interesting news, though, that has been surrounded right now is Jacob Trouba. I think it's an interesting one. What's your thoughts on the latest with, this potential trade rumor here?
So it's very funny you bring this up. We recorded Liberty Blue about 2 hours ago, and we don't know because there are two very conflicting narratives as to what happened. So the original report was the Rangers, Drury and Trouba had a meeting Wednesday or Thursday of the week going into the draft. They had a meeting. They sat down. Drury asked for the list. His list wasn't due until July 1st, but they sat down. Drury and them had a meeting. There was an article in the New York Post about Trouba was caught off guard. He was surprised, but that it was moving towards the Rangers were going to attempt to trade him. Saturday of the draft, it's reported by Larry Brooks, Elliot Friedman, and Emily Kaplan that the Detroit Red Wings are the landing spot and that those two sides are working towards the trade. We don't hear anything the end of Saturday. We don't hear anything Sunday. Then Monday, Larry Brooks writes an article that basically retracts everything that's been said over the previous 72 hours. The Rangers never told Trouba he was going to be traded. There was never a trade on the table with Detroit. And Trouba might not go to a team even if they're not on his no-trade list because he doesn't want to leave his family. So either somebody was entirely wrong from the get-go, or there's, public relations shenanigans going on. I'm more inclined to believe it's PR shenanigans going on because why would you ask the guy for his list if he was never going to get traded? Why would you ask for his list early, like they did either Thursday or Friday, the week of the draft, if you weren't going to try and trade him before Monday before free agency? Again, we don't know, so I can't speak authoritatively, definitively, but based on what's been reported and subsequently reported, it's not all adding up. I think Trouba, more than anything, is a cap casualty. That was the argument for the Rangers trying to move him, is that he makes $8 million and he's the third defenseman on the right side on the depth chart right now. And the Rangers wanted to be players in free agency. They were linked to Kane, to Stamkos, to Marchessault, and they weren't going to be able to do that unless they traded Trouba.
Yeah, and that's the one thing too. And I've even talked about this. I'll be talking more about this on Thursday's show because, again, there are teams that I've seen in the offseason that there are aggressive teams who have the cap that they're able to get aggressive in the offseason. But then there are some that are just so cap stretched thin that it's kind of hard to really, acquire more pieces when you know that you've got contracts involved. Now, I think the interesting thing is, I'd like your thought on this before letting you go, but this offseason, man, I mean, a $1.3 billion spending this year, I think is incredible. And at the same time, you watch teams that that are going to be, they're changing the narrative of what they are from the past season, maybe in the seasons before, and then what they're going to outlook into next season. And then there's some of those teams that I think could take the step back because it's either the cap situation or they either didn't end up addressing a lot of players. And sorry, Anaheim Ducks, but in the end, there's going to be a lot of different changes in narratives. But then you've got the new cap space that's going to be coming in the next year. I mean, this is some new money that's starting to come in here. And how do you think that the financial situations will shape for the league?
That's the biggest thing is we've been in essentially a flat cap environment for 5 years now. The cap was $81.5 million for 2019, 2020, and that was 4 years ago. You look at where the NBA has gone, where the NFL has gone, where the luxury tax ceiling in baseball is, those have grown exponentially in the last handful of years. And I remember I wrote something in the fall of 2019 that as soon as the new TV deal kicks in, every team should have something in the ballpark of an additional, I think it was like 300 something million in revenue once you kicked it all out over the extended life. And that's how it's calculated. The salary cap's calculated based off of revenue. And because that new TV money couldn't be tapped into because the players were paying off escrow the last 3.5 seasons, that money was just kind of just going into the owners' pockets for the season and the postseason where there were no fans or limited fans in the buildings. So with that in mind, I think the NHL is about, I think it was 8 years ago, was the Durant to the Warriors summer. That was the summer everyone went crazy in the NBA, where every team got $25 million against the cap. Hockey got a small version of that. $5 million is not $25 million, but relatively speaking, where the NBA salary cap was then and the NHL salary cap is now, it's about the same thing. And the other point I'll add on to that, free agency is usually the next general manager's problem. And that's why you see these contracts that get handed out. That the Chandler Stevenson contract really doesn't look good under the light. The Brady Shea contract probably doesn't look pretty good a few years from now. But free agency is useful to plug holes. You're never going to be able to build a team in free agency, but you need a third line wing. You need a third defenseman. There you can be successful. But I think Nashville is going to very quickly realize they needed more than just 3 guys. But they're not trying to win the Stanley Cup. They're just trying to make the playoffs and be competitive. So everybody's kind of got different aspirations, and you got to put the context of that behind the moves.
I actually like that. I'm glad that I'm keeping a clip of that because I think that's very educational for at least for our audience here, especially when we're understanding the cap situations and, of course, contract reasons. Because what's funny is I've always said, could you imagine if hockey had baseball salary cap that has no cap at all? And I mean, good God, all these hockey players would be blessed. They wouldn't have to spend like an arm and a leg to get goalie gear and because hockey equipment's expensive. So I'm like, so I could only imagine what NHL's cap situation would be like if, unlike all these other 3 major sports cap situations would be like. I think they'd be in heaven by now. But, again, everybody's different. And sometimes when you look at general managers, you look at how aggressive do they get? Are they smart when it comes to a lot of these things? Because, again, if I had somebody that was smart that knew the cap salary, the salary cap situation, and we got quality players, hell, I would sign that guy up as my own personal accountant if I really wanted to. So, but Nick, appreciate you jumping on by, man. Great stuff up on the show. I'm glad we got a clip of it. Where can people find you to really kind of fuel up for the Edmonton Oilers, man, when you're getting quality content like that?
My Twitter handle is just my name, Nick Zararis, Nick Zararis. Same thing on Instagram, and then on TikTok, it's Nick Zararis Sports. Mostly hockey stuff, but occasionally foray out there into football and baseball as well.
Well, there you go, folks. Definitely tune in on him, man. Great stuff. Appreciate you jumping on by, Nick. Enjoy the rest of the week, man, and we shall see if there's any more surprises that we got here up in free agency. Take care, my friend.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Well, what do you think, Chase? I thought, what's so funny? He made a great point with that, with the cap situation, because I just think that, when we watch the NFL, you could just see from a lot of these general managers, when they manage the cap situation and the money-wise, I think that's a very valid point. I could honestly only imagine what the cap situation would be if they were in a totally different environment than these other 3 major sports that we have. I thought that, God, I'm glad I'm saving that clip because I thought that was great for people that want to understand financials like that, because that's a pretty damn good point, especially when you're going into free agency.
And that's the one thing that a lot of people don't realize is the cap space or the cap situation that is in every other major sport except baseball. And people are like, they should have a cap for baseball, but I think that it's a lot more difficult to have one for that sport just because, the severity of it, because, you can't build an MLB roster if you have a salary cap space or salary cap situation that just can't be done. Now in the NFL, I think Jerry Jones is onto something, in my opinion, having a separate salary cap for just quarterbacks in general because of how expensive they are towards the cap. I think that would be a good idea. Have a salary cap of $100 million. You can't go over that for your quarterback, and then have the team salary cap. But, it's very, very interesting. Imagine what football would be like if they didn't have a cap, how ridiculous that would be. And it's just, who's the highest bidder for this player?
Oh, God, man. I could only imagine if that was the case, because I think people would literally be like freaking out with this whole thing where it's just like, oh God, there's a move there, there's a move here. It's just like, yeah, I mean, but my thing with this is like, and I think he makes a great point of it, was the term length of contracts. I can understand that because baseball, you are paid 13 years in a contract just to play one position. How does that even make any sense?
It just depends. I mean, pitchers get paid less because they have more tax, or their arms are more taxed than what the rest of the players' bodies are. Because if you look at pitchers, like there's a lot of them that sign either 3-year deals or 6-year deals. You don't see them signing 10, 12, or 15-year deals. And somebody asked me that the one day. They're like, why do pitchers get like far less money or far less years than what regular MLB players do? I'm like, here's the difference between that, because their arms are the only thing that is keeping them in the whole career. Once their arm gets tired and they can't throw no more, then you are done. With a regular position player, you can be out there until you're 40 years old. As long as you can hit the ball and you can run, you will be able to play. Regardless of what it is, you could be a DH and just go out there and hit, and you could still play. For a pitcher, you have to be able to throw hard. You have to have, the dynamics of your pitches and everything. And teams don't want to invest in pitchers for 10 plus years because with the risks of Tommy John surgery or Tommy John happening, or the surgeries that you have to your elbow ligaments and everything, and like you could never be the same afterwards. So that's why the pitchers always get shorter contracts, because of like that's the only thing that they can rely on.
And it's funny because again, and it's kind of interesting that they think of this with pitchers, but the funny part of it is that their innings are getting limited. Like it's not like how it was before, where they could go a whole full stretch 9. I usually say for starting pitchers, give me a solid 6, 7 at least. And then I could bring my setup guy for the 8th and then the closer in the 9th, obviously. But now, for a lot of dominant pitchers, I think, and this might be a hot take from it, I think we might see the first 10-year contract with a pitcher, depending on how it looks for Paul Skeens. I think he could be that first pitcher that will get a contract like that, because the guy's just ridiculous. Anytime I watch his control and anytime when I watch him pitch, the guy is unbelievable. He's an all-star now in his rookie season as a number 1 overall pick.
And the thing is, he didn't even play like half the season either. Like he came in, I think, like 2 months ago or something, and like he's the next Steven Strasburg is what everybody's saying. Like he's supposed to be the next big thing, and he will be. And the thing is, like my answer to that is, a lot of managers are limiting the time that the pitchers are in pitching, because the first half of the season usually doesn't matter to them. Like they will go into their bullpens more and more at the beginning of the season, and then keep their starters fresh and healthy for the end, so that way they can go longer and they don't have to rely on the bullpens that much. And also, so that way if they do make the playoffs, they got that playoff push and they can use the arms of their starting pitchers longer. That's been a big strategy that a lot of managers have looked towards over the past few years and most recent, because you don't have the guys like the Nolan Ryans, the Randy Johnsons, the Greg Maddoxes of this day and age, but you do have the guys that if they wanted to, you could bring them in off of 3 days rest and they could pitch another 60, 70 pitches and still be all right.
Yeah, that's very true, man. Yeah, like I said, I just think cap situations are different for everybody in all 4 major sports. And even with what we're seeing right now with the WNBA is starting to come up right now, they're getting some new money. So it'll be interesting.
Lost $50 million. That's kind of funny.
Oh, I know, right? Oh my gosh. Well, what do you say, man? We get into some news here?
Yeah. So
all right. Let's do it. Here is space for the news.
This is the hot press.
All right.
So I want to take I don't know. Vikings, a corner that they have drafted out of Oregon, and he was looking forward to playing a lot this year. And what he was a passenger in the seat of a car that got hit by a drunk driver, and he had passed away at the ripe age of 22 or 23. And I don't care who you are. Nobody needs to badmouth the man, regardless of who it is. I'm not going to mention who the guy is, but there is a video going around on TikTok of a certain sports person badmouthing it, saying that it was his fault and that, he deserved what he got and everything. So,
oh, come on. This ain't no Henry Ruggs. Come on, bro. We're not going to do that. Here's where I think people kind of get the concept very mixed up. Look, we have seen this, that we understand that if you are the driver in the vehicle and you happen to blow more than the normal blood alcohol amount, then you need a Lyft. You need an Uber. Okay. I'm not going to risk you going and driving a vehicle. Okay. We've learned this with Henry Ruggs and the dumb decision he made, and to eventually where it costed somebody's life. And then, by the way, Nate Hobbs was also one that was intoxicated, but yet he did not drive. He slept in the car. But regardless of it, Metropolitan came in and they seen that he blew this amount, and they said, you could have potentially have been driving under the influence if you really wanted to. Regardless even if he was sleeping in the vehicle, you are in the driver's seat. So don't be dumb with that. But in this case, he was a passenger
in a seat where the car was just driving down the road and their car got hit by the drunk driver. It's just, how is it his fault is what irritated me.
Oh, I mean, when I saw that video, I was so irate because I'm like, this happens to people. This does happen to people. Okay. And look, I have many choice of words when it comes to people who drive under the influence and people that basically, cost somebody else's life. I have special words for that. I'm not using this on the show because it's not appropriate for it. But here's the thing.
Exactly.
We're just in this point where, again, social media leans one way or the other. But I think realistically and humanely, when you think about it from a human standpoint, you don't wish this upon anybody. And for a future who could have honestly had been a star player, I mean, he could have been, but we now will never be able to know that. And for God's sakes, the kid is younger than me. I'm 29, and every day, look, we risk our lives every single day when we're on roller coasters, when we're on, when we're on planes, when we're on all of this. But have some decency, have some respect, because this could have been you. I don't direct this towards anybody, but this could be you if this was the case. But again, I feel for the family, thoughts and prayers and condolences to the family. This is a hard time. Condolences to the Minnesota Vikings organization, a player that could have been. It just sucks when you literally come across news like this. You don't wish this upon anybody at all.
Yeah, when a career gets ended that early, nobody wants to, and not just a career, a person's life gets ended that early as well. You don't wish that upon anybody. And I'm not really going to indulge the information of who that was, but if you guys are curious on who the person was that made that video, go to TikTok and look up Sports Take on Kyrie Jackson passing away, and you'll see the video that pops up and you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. The same thing happened to Yuriando Ventura. I don't know if you know who that is or not. When he went to his home in the Dominican Republic during the offseason after he had just won the World Series the year prior, he got hit by a drunk driver in the Dominican Republic and then got his World Series ring stolen from his car off of his body. And, it was very heartbreaking that he didn't even do anything. He was just driving, and then he got T-boned and stuff like that. But let's go into some more lighter news. I am not a big basketball guy, but I do know who this player is, and I do know how impactful he is to his team and the sport. DeMar DeRozan getting sent to the Kings. What is your thought on that?
Man, you know what I got to say? Win for the Kings, loss for the Lakers. Because this is kind of the deal. This is the dilemma we're right now going with the Lakers. The fact that you lost to the Kings on the sweepstakes up on this should be an absolute embarrassment. Because here's my thought on this is that I think the Kings, they are a much better team. I don't think they're better than a lot of these teams right now that we're seeing in the conference or even in the NBA, but they got better. They got a veteran, experienced player to match with Domantas Sabonis and De'Aaron Fox. That's pretty damn good. And after they moved on from, Buddy Hield and they moved on from a lot of different players, I think they are much better today because right now, I mean, you saw the news on the Lakers with Bronny James, right? And I had a lot to say about that, man. And I'm just like, the fact nobody wants to – look, I was battling somebody up on Twitter today when I had to be honest about the Vegas Golden Knights. You've known this in the last couple of episodes. I was honest, and I'm like, look, I'm not going to turn down from being challenged with the amount of sports knowledge I have in my head. I'm fine with, the challenge, but let's be reasonable here. When you have a culture that you just look like right now, you've got a coach that I have no experience coaching in. I've got one that you're basically in a LeBron business mode because you're basically gave him 2 years with 104 guaranteed of this money, and you've got a son that now you pulled out who has only scored 4 points in 21 minutes. How is that even going to gel as a camaraderie together in this chemistry? I don't think DeMar DeRozan wants to be a part of that. I think he evaluated and is like, appreciate you guys for voicing up on this, but I don't want any part of this. So I felt like the Kings got better, and the Lakers are just continuously amusing us with this circus show. I don't know, man. I just felt like that was a big loss for the Lakers.
Some more news that I got, and it's not really new news, but a lot of people don't realize how impactful this could be for the East. The Cavs' new head coach coming as an assistant from the Golden State Warriors, and now is the head coach of the Cleveland Cavaliers.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a pretty strong hire in my opinion. I think when you are around a winning culture like what Golden State was, and you bring that on to a team that, and then again, a lot of the voices were, what were they going to do with Donovan Mitchell? They clearly answered that. They gave him a contract extension. They want to build around him, and yet this is a young team that I think is only going to get better because you look at what the Eastern Conference looks like. I mean, there are now potentially 5 to 6 competitive teams that are in this conference now. So I feel like you add on a coach with a winning mentality experience, a guy that I think could get the best out of their players. It's interesting to see. But I think the Cavs really did answer a lot of questions with as far as the Donovan Mitchell thing. And I think if you get Donovan Mitchell a couple more pieces next to this with a young roster that is kind of organically building, I think it could kind of make a case for the Cavs that they could be interesting come next season.
Yeah, and then last but not least, we've got the guy that we talked about earlier on the show. He only has played half the season, but he is one of the most dominant players in not just the sport that he plays in, but in all pro sports. And the fact that he is doing this as a rookie and made the All-Star game as a rookie is phenomenal. And that is Paul Skeens. I mean, the Pirates are looking at the future. They got Brian Reynolds, who's also a phenomenal player for them, a All-Star this year as well. And then they got a solid reliever in the bullpen. And then they also got another 2 guys, I just don't remember their names at the moment, that are rising stars in the starting rotation as well. Now, if they can just piece together a couple position players and, start building that roster a little bit more, I feel like the Pirates, either next year or the year after, will be a force in that NL Central, and they could potentially win that division.
I just think with the Pirates, my hope is that they've learned a few things from moving on from Garrett Cole and Jamison Tyon and Tyler Glasnow. Because,
and Beckett.
Yep, and Beckett, because these were some serious pitching arms that really gave you something. So this is what's so impressive about, because Paul Skeens is impressing me every single start that he has. He's 5-0 with a 2.12 ERA, 78 strikeouts. His strikeouts per 9 is 11.89 or 11.83. That's insane. Like,
most people don't have 78 strikeouts at this point in time of the year.
Not even close. And for the amount of serious, stupid control he has of a lot of his pitches, I mean, this guy, I know we kind of look at him as the next Steven Strasburg, but look, if he is giving me numbers like this on a consistent basis every year, he's knocking on Nolan Ryan's window. And I think you give him, like you said, very good offensive support. I think that if you could address a couple of defensive pieces that could help him to get out of a lot of innings, even if he's going, a 7-inning stretch at least for a starting pitcher, I think you can make that case and argument that Paul Skeens could arguably, next couple of years, he'll be a top 10 pitcher for sure, like in all of baseball.
He'll be probably the best pitcher in all of baseball and the face of baseball. Right now, Shohei Ohtani is the face of baseball. And, I think that we've kind of gotten away from him a little bit because he hasn't been able to pitch this year because he's recovering from his elbow injury. He didn't need to require surgery, but the doctors did say that he needed to cut back on the pitching. Otherwise, it would get to the point where Tommy John was needed. So he took a year off of pitching, and I think that he is going to try to come back probably after the All-Star break to try to start pitching again and everything. But Shohei is the face of baseball right now. Paul Skeens will take that from him in the next couple years. And it was kind of funny because everybody that was watching the draft last year was looking at Dylan Cruz, the guy on Paul Skeens' team, who was one of the better outfielders. And they were like, well, who are they going to get? Are they going to get Dylan Cruz or are they going to get Paul Skeens? Well, defense wins championships in football. Pitching wins championships in baseball. And if you're going to be an organization, like you can have the best bats in the world, but if your pitching staff doesn't hold in there and you can't win, then, the 1995 Cleveland Indians proved it. They could outslug anybody, but their pitching staff was horrendous, and it showed.
What's funny about that? Another one that I could probably make a case for, the 2002 San Francisco Giants. Because you think about it, yes, you could have a Barry Bonds on your roster, but if your pitching does not get you out of innings, like as exciting as that World Series was in 2002, and I think the improbable that the Angels basically did, they had some very good bats from Tim Salmon and Troy Glass at the time, but that pitching is what really held a lot of it together. And I think, I think for a domestic player like Paul Skeens, you can make that argument. He is definitely the face as far as domestic players go, because look, we have had years where we've watched Nolan Ryan. We have watched, I think Tom Seaver was an amazing one. I think
Randy Johnson,
Steven Strasburg, even Max Scherzer was another. Justin Verlander and what he's been able to do from the time.
You're talking about 2-time Cy Young winners and everything, guys that have been like very dynamic and very nasty with all the stuff that they got. You also got to throw in Sandy Koufax in there. There's a lot of
Clayton Kershaw. Oh my
guys. there's a lot of big name guys that you can name. Even Johan Santana, when he was first coming into the league, was a nasty thrower of the ball. And even Tim Wickfield did not have the stuff, but that knuckleball of his was something to be feared because he was as good as what he was. And then you got Aroldis Chapman as one of the better relievers in the league, but then you got Pedro Martinez, who has also been known as the greatest reliever of the game. And same thing with Mariano Rivera. Like, you got all these pitchers that came into the league nowadays, and I think Paul Skeens is going to outshine 90% of them that I just named.
Oh, 100%. And I think, yeah, he really is going to redefine the pitcher itself because, again, Shohei Ohtani is just the face of all of baseball from both domestic and internationally. But I think when you get a guy in a mixture like that, in Paul Skeens, I think you're definitely bound for greatness in the pitching department. It's just such a blessing to have a polarizing, like I talked about, having a polarizing player like that who just redefines its position is just something so special that we are so blessed to have that in sports. Seriously.
Oh yeah. And like, you don't have to be a fan of the Pittsburgh Pirates, but watching this guy pitch and watching this guy play, you are drawn into it every single game and every single time that he's out there on the mound. And I'll tell you what, like, there are people that are paying top dollar to drive across country to come see this man pitch live. Or if the Pirates are going out to LA to face the Dodgers, people are paying money to go see them. Like, I saw something the other day where the Pirates have sold out like 10 straight games that he's pitched.
Yeah, and PNC Park, man. I mean, when you got the Allegheny River up out there in that lake, I mean, it's a beautiful ballpark. PNC Park is beautiful in some of those days, especially when you get it in the right day with the right temperature. PNC Park is great. It's absolutely wonderful.
I want to go to it. I want to go to it.
That was my plan initially because, again, like I had a friend of mine who did play for the Pirates organization who's now with the Detroit Tigers. And so, like, I would have loved to have seen his debut because he had such a stellar debut. Blymetris, look him up. It was a former teammate of mine in high school. I'm so happy for him. And like I said, I'm waiting for this day to get him onto the show because I think it would be great to have a former teammate, but yet have a successor out of my high school to be now in Major League Baseball is just an absolute wonderful story. Great guy, hands down. All right, well, that was Chase with the news.
This is the Hot Press.
All right, so Chase has his attire, and so do I, and I am really ready for this one. I sent Chase the list basically to read down with all the AFC teams. Now, for those who know me for as long as I've done the show, born and raised in Las Vegas, I have been used to being around the casinos. I've been around poker tables, blackjack tables, slots, all this thing, all of it. So I'm inviting my good friend Chase up and onto my table here when we break down all of these AFC teams from win totals, because I just think you and I have been in a lot of these rooms, man, and people are doubting so much of a lot of these teams, like all NFL teams. And I think we have to be the silver lining, like, explanation of what these teams, what their outlooks are going to be from their win-loss totals. Now, all of these are provided by BetUS because we got prop bets, so definitely check them out, betus.com, BetUS, where the game begins. Chase, are you ready for this, my man?
I am certainly ready. Well, let's start from the bottom and then go from the top.
All right, let's make it happen, man, because I am excited to see this. So here we go. Our call, hold, and fold on our poker table itself. I think it's going to be great. But here we go. Let's take a look at some of these teams here. All right.
Well, we got New England Patriots at a 4.5. You call, hold, or fold for the New England Patriots?
All right. Let me see if I can find. I definitely uploaded so many of these things here today. All right. So I don't have it in particular, but I do have them. So their win-loss total, from what I've seen, I'm going to be very respectful up on this one. I'm going to basically call for the New England Patriots. So here's the thing. I think they could be good enough to win at least 5 games. I'm going to be fair about that. I'll give them one more win. I think they definitely need to fix the offensive side of the ball. Now, they did get they did get two quarterbacks, Joe Milton and Drake May. Now, Drake May, I know he's a kind of a raw player out of North Carolina. And as I've said, I think if you got the left tackle right that could protect his blind side, I think you can make a case and argument that I think he can work. But I just feel like this team, I know what they are defensively, but offensively, I got to see how Gerard Mayo really works this. It's a new coach. It's a new regime. If they get more than 5 wins, I mean, this could be an interesting team moving forward up on this, but I'm definitely putting my chips in, and I'm calling it here for the New England Patriots to maybe get one more slight win over the 4.5 that they projected.
See, I wish there was a raise because I would definitely raise it. For me, I'm going to go like 6.5, maybe even 7, just because Drake May, in my opinion, was the best quarterback in this draft class by far. I do think that he had all of the perfect intangibles that you're looking for. A guy that's 6'4", a guy that's accurate, able to read the field, throw the ball down the field, and just be able to make a play in the pocket and just stand in there and do it. And that's something that Caleb Williams, whenever the pocket would break down, he would run out of it without even looking down the field. And even when he was looking down the field and he was running out the pocket, he just would tuck it and run, even when he had a guy open downfield. And they showed this in film. So my opinion, I think that Drake May is a lot better than what people think he is. But with the state of the New England wide receivers that they have, it's going to all depend on how well this offense can be ran. So
all right. Well, who we got next?
We got the Broncos at 5.5.
Okay, so the Denver Broncos, and listen, I live in Denver, and I'm going to be nice to them at least. I'm not going to be hard on their potential win total, but I'll be honest with you. I think the Denver Broncos, I'm going to call on them because I think 5.5 is just such an understatement considering the coach that they have in Sean Payton, which here was the thing. They did up their win totals last year. And offense was not the problem. I just felt like defense, they did not have enough of the players to really kind of stop a lot of their opponents. Now, I think 5.5 is just kind of just an understatement to me. I just think it's a disrespect because in the end, I know they have a new quarterback, and I know that they've also got Zach Wilson in their back pocket, but I just feel like I know the hard, hefty work is that they are playing 13 straight weeks of football, and then they've got week 14 as their bye week. But I just feel like it's such an understatement with the Denver Broncos. I'm going to call. I think this is a team that's worthy enough of winning 7, maybe potentially 8 games at least. I just think this AFC West, it is competitive, but I just think that the Broncos, they'll be better than 5.5.
I'm going to go call as well. I think that it's, you're looking at a team that with Sean Payton as the head coach, everybody wants to say that he's a terrible head coach. He is a guy that had 4 different starting quarterbacks his last year with the Saints, and he went 9-8 with them. And I think he either made the playoffs or barely missed it by literally the final outcome of the last game of the season was the determining factor. And he got Russell Wilson playing a lot better. His stats were I think he had 3,600 yards or 3,700 last year and more touchdowns than he did the year before. And I do think that he picked Bo Nix, not just because he was the next best available quarterback, but because he thinks that he sees Drew Brees in Bo Nix and he can get the best out of him. So picking up Troy Franklin out of Oregon to pair with the guy that he played with in college and everything. And, also to help with the loss of Jerry Jeudy. I think that was huge for them. But, yeah, it all depends on what they can do on the defensive side of the ball. You don't really have anybody except for PS2, and that's about it.
Yeah, and like I said, and I've been keeping my word up on this, Bo Nix is my sleeper when it comes to quarterback this year. I think it'd be interesting.
He does not have faith in Bo Nix.
All right. Who we got next?
We got the Tennessee Titans at 6.5. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to call for this one. I think that they are going to be way better than what people think. I actually have them as a sleeper to possibly get the last wild card spot in the AFC. I got them at possibly 9.5 to 10 wins. With the upgraded weapons that they got, with Tyler Boyd coming in, Calvin Ridley coming in, Brian Callahan coming from a winning organization in Cincinnati and realizing how that offense was played. Not to mention, you bring in L'Jarius Sneed, one of the better corners in this league, to pair up on that defensive side of the ball with your up-and-coming young stars, including Jeffrey Simmons on that defensive side of the ball. I think the Titans are going to be better than what people think. It all depends on what Will Levis can do.
I think you made a wise decision up on there, and I'm glad you're up and on my table, my friend, because I'm calling for the Tennessee Titans as well. I think when you got last year, you ended up getting Peter Skoronski from Northwestern that I think very much solidifies their tackle position, and you get another one in J.C. Latham. That tells me that you really are working the offensive line so that you have a better protected pocket for Will Levis. I thought it was pretty impressive. Now, again, I think the contract situation with these wide receivers, with Tyler Boyd and with Calvin Ridley and with a couple of these guys is interesting. But now the hard part is Treylon Burks, I have not heard a lot of positive stuff in camp. But maybe he turns that around in the season. Again, I don't know. This could be very interesting. Now, I think Spears, the running back, and Tony Pollard, I think they will definitely. Now, I don't think Tony Pollard is very much a solidified one, but I think if you split the carries, at least with both of these guys, you're getting a mixture of power and speed. And I think ultimately that's what the Titans are. They're all about power. They're the kind that are going to basically come in on any given Sunday, sock it in the mouth, and then go on the road to the next opponent that they can. Now, again, I think the attitude with Mike Vrabel may be gone, but at least my hope with Brian Callahan is that he's going to fix this offense. Defensively might be interesting. Now, they did get L'Jarius Sneed. Now, it might be hard with some of those pieces like Danico Autry and then Aziz Al-Shakir might be interesting losses that I don't know if they'll really recover from, but if they prove me wrong on this defense, this Titans team could be pretty scrappy and could be something that you could make a case for next season. So I'm with you on that.
They did end up beating the Dolphins, so they beat a couple teams down the stretch. Will Levis was playing better than what people think. Everybody looks at what he was doing, and it's like, oh, he wasn't that good. The man was actually reading the defenses pretty well, throwing the ball into tight windows. He was accurate, and he was making the right decisions downfield. I think that Will Levis is going to be just fine this year.
Yeah, I think so too. All right, so we got
the Raiders next. They are at 6.5. I am actually going to go ahead and hold with the Oakland/Vegas Raiders because, they ended up picking up Brock Bowers. They ended up picking up Michael Mayer last year. They've got Devontae Adams. They released Hunter Renfrow. They don't really have another solid wide receiver opposite of Devontae, but it's all about the quarterback play. Aiden O'Connell, he was a rookie last year. He's the second-year quarterback, or it's Gardner Minshew. We don't know who it's going to be yet. The thing that scares me is their defensive side of the ball. Everybody's like, don't sleep on the Raiders' defense. Well, the only thing that scares me is their defensive line with Max Crosby and Christian Wilkins, and then I forgot who they got on the opposite end of Crosby, but the Raiders, their secondary and their linebacker core is just weak, and that is what's going to be their Achilles heel, their weakness, and what's going to get them blown out in a lot of these games, or make it not as close as what people think. The offense may be able to keep them in games, but you also lost Josh Jacobs, and you don't really have a good running back to replace him. So I'm going to go ahead and hold with the Oakland Raiders.
Yeah, I think, with the Las Vegas Raiders, I'm going to be I'm going the opposite on this one because I do think this is a team that can maybe win 7 games at least. So I'm nice enough to give them one more win because I do think when they battle in the trenches, I think what we've learned about Antonio Pierce is that defense was so invested with Antonio Pierce. They were, because since he's been the coach, they have given up 17 points to the opponent. So that means that they've been playing shutdown and lockdown football. Now, I know the secondary might be different, and the linebacking core outside of Robert Spillane, who I thought was a very underrated player on that defense. Offensively, the quarterback situation, because I think Gardner Minshew sorry about that, may give you one more win. But I think, the Raiders, I just think that they are eventually going to need to. They're kind of seeing right now with what they're going to get at quarterback. But I do think with Gardner Minshew, you are going to get one extra win, and it's going to come somewhere in this schedule. But I do think the Raiders, they could end up winning 7 games at least. But I don't think it's very far off. I think 6.5, 7 wins is probably what I'm looking at with the Raiders. Yeah. So I slightly call with this one. Chase is going to hold it up on this one. But I don't think it's too far away for this team.
No, it's not. And that's the next team right there is the Indianapolis Colts. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to call. They got them at 8.5. I'm going to give them more than that. They had 9 wins last year with Gardner Minshew as their quarterback. I think that bringing in Adonai Mitchell, who was possibly one of the best weapons in the draft that you could possibly get, to pair alongside Michael Pittman Jr. and Josh Downs and Jonathan Taylor. You got a strong offensive line with Fries and then Braden something, I forgot his last name, as your left tackle, and then Zaire Franklin on the defensive side of the ball, pairing him with Kenny Moore in the secondary. Like, they signed a lot of their guys back, and this was all without Anthony Richardson on the field, and Anthony Richardson was balling out for the 3 games that he was on the field. I mean, the first game of the season, they put up 31 points against the Houston Texans and that defense and everything. And you also saw a coach in Shane Steichen that ended up getting the best out of Jalen Hurts, the best out of Justin Herbert, and now he's going to get the best out of Anthony Richardson. I've got this team possibly winning 11, maybe even 12 games this year.
Yeah, I honestly am with you on that one. I'm calling with, the Indianapolis Colts, because my thing with this is Shane Steichen is such a rock star at head coach. I think at the same time, too, you are getting back an Anthony Richardson that we know that has kind of gone through injury protocols. But again, the kid's a freak of nature. I think the kid can run, he can throw. And this is what's funny about that people don't seem to realize is that Shane Steichen dealt with a mobile quarterback. He dealt with Jalen Hurts. And you also got an arm, which he also coached around with Justin Herbert. So you got a mix of both worlds with Anthony Richardson. You can make a case that I think that the Colts could definitely be my playoff team from there in the wild card, because I think
see that.
Absolutely, because I think Adonai Mitchell coming in with a really good season from Josh Downs. They gave me another receiver, and then you got Michael Pittman. This wide receiving core, not a lot of people are talking about how completely underrated that this receiving core can be next season, because Steichen is all about mobilizing and running and throwing the football in a lot of really good spots. I mean, he's very clever in his offensive playbook. Now, Quentin Nelson, he's going to be back from injury, and I think the offensive line is a lot better. I think the Colts, with their defense, it'll be a lot interesting. But again, I'm getting DeForest Buckner, Zaire Franklin, and a couple of their secondary pieces. So I think you could definitely make a case for that. I'm calling. I think this could be in the South, with them competing with the Jags and the Texans and the Titans. This could be a team very much worthy of winning potentially 9-10 games. I think if they came off last year with 9 wins, they could very much be capable of winning 10 games next season.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree, and I could definitely see, a big push, because like we have seen what Steichen has been able to do, and just had one of the seasons with Steichen in the offense. But Pittsburgh is the next one. They got them at 8.5. I'm obviously gonna call and give them about maybe 9 or 10. With that, I think that with the addition of Russell Wilson and Justin Fields, adding them into that, but the loss of Deontay Johnson is going to hurt them a little bit, because, you replaced him with Roman Wilson, but we don't really know what he's capable of being a rookie. And then what you got Calvin Austin. I mean, you don't have anybody else on the Steelers depth chart that really scares me in terms of their offense. And then you got Jalen Warren and Najee Harris. The Steelers defense is the thing that's going to keep them in a lot of games this year.
Yeah, I do agree, and I'm with you on this one. I'm calling for the Steelers. I think they very much look like this could be a team that could win 9 games at least. And I mean, again, Mike Tomlin has a 2-year extension, has still never lost a season. So, But besides all that, here's my takeaways with the Steelers that most people don't realize. Number one, Russell Wilson is coming into a plug-in-and-play type situation. That's the quarterback he is. You are not putting the pressure of the franchise on his shoulders. We saw that in Denver. He's not capable of that. And he doesn't need to be a savior of the franchise either. So my thought with the Steelers, and listen, they've got George Pickens, and I know they've got Calvin Austin, and they've also got Roman Wilson. But I never, ever doubt with what the Steelers have been able to do with their wide receiving core. I mean, that has been offensive weaponry has been the absolute it has been the absolute arsenal for the Steelers in the last, decade.
They got Freiermuth and Washington, too. I forgot about both of them.
Yep, Pat Freiermuth and Washington. And so they know how to find weapons, which is really interesting because, again, you go from the years of when they had Lynn Swann to Stalwart to Hines Ward and all these. They have no problem finding weapons, which is why it's not a doubt for me. But I think finally what the Steelers have been able to realize, offensive line last year sucked. So what did they do? They got Troy Fatanu. They got a bunch of really good players.
Yeah, Frazier, who was one of the better centers in the league or in the draft. So.
Oh yeah, I mean they finally are figuring out that offensive line sucked last year, which is one thing that Mike Tomlin could not get right. So if this offensive line is much better this year, the Steelers could make a case that they could be a 9-win team this next season. Even
maybe more. But in a division with Myles Garrett, Justin Madubuike, Trey Hendrickson, all these defensive line pieces, you definitely need an offensive line that you have. So we're moving on to the next team here. We got the Jacksonville Jaguars at 8.5. I am going to call and give them at least a minimum of another win. I think that with a healthy Trevor Lawrence, a upgraded roster, bringing in Brian Thomas Jr. out of LSU, who is their true deep threat. I think the weakness that is Calvin Ridley was more of a X wide receiver playing a slot, and they were trying to put him at the Y and trying to put him out wide, and that's not what his strengths are. He can't take the top off the defense. He's a good route runner and everything, but he didn't get the separation that they needed. That's what Brian Thomas Jr. is there for. And then bringing in a guy like Gabe Davis, who is also that type of wide receiver. You got Christian Kirk coming back fully healthy, Evan Ingram, who has been one of the better tight ends in the league, and not to mention Travis Etienne. With, Josh Allen still on that team, Trayvon Walker, the first overall pick that they got 2 years ago, and you still got Devin Lloyd, the linebacker out of Georgia that they ended up picking up, and Campbell. Campbell was one of their rising stars on the defensive side for their secondary. I just think that they are a little bit weak in the secondary in terms of safety, free safety, strong safety, and opposite corner. But I think I got the Jags winning about 10, maybe 11 wins this year.
Yeah, I think, with what I've seen with 8.5, I think this could be a 9-10 win team potentially. I mean, this is a prove-it season right now for Doug Peterson. Because after last year, what we got, this team was getting hot, and then eventually they kind of just
7-3.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden they just became mediocre, which is one of the problems I've always had with the Jacksonville Jaguars is that there are times where they look good, and then all of a sudden they just become mediocre every single time when they get on a streak. So I think Doug Peterson, because again, I counted with as far as, hot sauces. I think, to me, Doug Peterson's seat is hot. Okay, because it went from mild, hot, and then Diablo. I think it's definitely hot, in my opinion, because you got to make this right.
No, it's Ghost Pepper right now.
But like the thing is, I agree with you with the secondary. The secondary is questionable to me, but if they can win those games where because Trevor Lawrence, you're paying $55 million a year for, I mean, you better hope that
one good season with him when he's fully healthy. Because we all kind of push away the Urban Meyer season. We seen the second season where he was fully healthy. He got like 4,200 yards, had 26 touchdowns and everything to 7 interceptions. And then we also seen last year, but he was hurt a majority of the year. So when we see a fully healthy Trevor Lawrence, we got to see what he can do this year. And we're gonna see. We're gonna sit here and we're gonna be like, all right, I am very optimistic about it, but we'll see.
By the way,
go ahead and move on to the next team, which is the
my hunch. Keep your eye on Travis Etienne for fantasy football owners. I just have a hunch he is going to have a very, very good fantasy season this next year.
I think so too. I really do. A lot of people are also sleeping on Chubb, thinking that he's not going to do well because of the injury. But when he comes back, lights out. Speaking of that, we got the Cleveland Browns at
Hockey, man.
I am going to call this because there is no way we go from 11-6, where we didn't even play a single starter the last game of the season, to lose that game. And we had 33% of our roster injured, more than anybody in the league. We had 5 different quarterbacks starting. And the fact that we had the best defense in the league, and everybody still thinks that we're going to win last games.
God, isn't it just incredible what Kevin Stefanski could honestly do as an offensive coach? I'm with you on that. Like, I just think 8.5 after what I just seen Kevin Stefanski do. This is what people don't realize, is that when you have an offensive coach, you have a backup plan. Okay, your star quarterback gets injured, you got to have your next guy up, but then you still have to be clever up on that offense. And that is a lot, because defensive coaches, what do they tend to be? They tend to be defensive. They tend to pull back on the reins. They don't give their quarterbacks enough leeway for them to lead the offense. So that's why I think Kevin Stefanski, with as much as he has done, this is a 10-11 win team. Yeah. And a defense like Cleveland's, like, how can you not? How can you not end up thinking this team could end up winning 10, 11 games next season? Like, that's insanity.
Yeah. For the next one, it's the Chargers. We got at 8.5. This one's tough because I want to think that they could be a sneaky good team, and I want to think that they could win at least a minimum of another game. I'm going to go ahead and call. I think that they can sneak in like a 9th win and everything. I don't quite see 10, 11 wins yet. I think that they are one more season of drafting, one more offseason of trying to see what free agent pieces that they can get, one more offseason away of drafting either another star-powered weapon or another alignment to help bolster the offense, or even a great secondary piece to pair along with Derwin James and that back half there, because now getting Junior Colson, probably one of the better linebackers in the draft, to be your leader on the defensive side of the ball, pairing him with Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa, and now Derwin James in the back half, along with Asante Samuel Jr. Like, you guys got the defensive pieces there. It's just a matter of if they can plug and play, and Jesse Minster could get that team going. But I think with Harbaugh in there, that is the biggest it factor and the reason why I'm giving them an extra win.
So here's what I will defend with the Chargers, and I'm calling this as well. I think this can be a 10-win team, and here's my defense and my explanation of it. So, again, I was arguing with the dude that basically thinks, culture is not everything. So then when you get, I believe continuity and chemistry is the most important factor in life, because especially when you have somebody who's that smart in the building, it doesn't matter what job field that you have. But if you could rally your troops around and they are bought in and they are invested, that's what Jim Harbaugh is. He's a culture setter. He's a guy that shapes the culture. And I think you are seeing a San Diego attitude coming back to this organization, regardless if they're up in Los Angeles. But this is the thing. And the argument that I think is really just a mockery, in my opinion, is, well, they don't have weapons. And I'm like, you know what? That wasn't a problem for Justin Herbert. When Keenan Allen and Mike Williams were both injured in his rookie season, he was throwing to guys like Tyron Johnson and Jalen Guyton and like no-name receivers. Oh, and by the way, he was throwing to a kick returner, DeAndre Carter. You've heard of him? He was throwing to him, and he was arguably a most underrated receiver for a kick returner.
Fall back on, and he does not have Austin Eckler.
Yeah, and now that is the one thing. And again, the rushing offense was 27th in the league last year, so that's why they brought in Greg Roman, because they need to give him a healthy rushing game. And by that point, the play action is going to be ridiculous with Jim Harbaugh. But I'm with you too. I think Jesse Minter, because they haven't had at least a strong defensive coordinator. Now, again, I think Ainsley could have had a fair chance, but because of the head coach that they had, with him pulling the reins every time and being the control freak, kind of gave him an unfair chance to prove himself. But you can make the argument that I think Jesse Minter, he is a run-stuffing type of defensive coordinator. He's a guy that stops the run. And I also do think he is a very, very good precision-type coverage guy when it comes to the linebackers. So I think that's why Junior Colson, he can read the field, and he's also somebody that can make important stops when you need to. So I think this team could potentially win 10 games this year. And you are gonna see the change of this culture, and this is where the organization is gonna prove a lot of these hecklers wrong, because I am tired of hearing the same narrative over and over and over again every time I hear it.
If people don't want to sit there and realize how much a coach can make a difference, go back to that 2022 season with Cleveland and how our defense was ranked 30th to 32nd in the league. And then the very next season, with the same exact defensive roster, we just bring in Jim Schwartz, and we are now the number one defense in the league.
Yeah,
it's
right.
Amazing what a coaching change and a coaching culture does to the whole defense, and to the whole team and the whole defensive side of the ball. It's amazing. And I think that Jim Harbaugh is what they need to fix that cancer in the LA locker room, because they had players at each other's throats. They had pointing fingers and everything, and I think that nobody was playing for each other. They were playing for themselves, except for maybe a handful of people, and that is something that needed to be nipped in the butt, and I think that Harbaugh is the guy to come in and do it.
Yeah, nobody wanted to play for Staley, and you could clearly see how much the players literally gave up on this guy. Like, the coaching makes a huge difference.
Yeah. So next we got the New York Jets. They got them at 9.5. I'm going to go ahead and call. I think that we don't know when Mike Williams is going to be back, but he's going to be back on the field. They got Malachi Corley as another offensive weapon. A lot of people aren't as high on Breece Hall as I am. I think that Breece is a very, very underrated running back in terms of his rushing ability and his ability to pass catch. Not to mention you got Garrett Wilson and the healthy Aaron Rodgers. If Rodgers is able to stay healthy and everything, I'm going to go ahead and call. If he's not, I'm going to go ahead and fold, because I don't think that anybody else on this Jets roster could lead this team to victories, except maybe Tyrod Taylor. But I'm going to go ahead and call at this point. Give him another win.
So my defense with this one, I am going to hold. And the only reason that I say that is because I don't know what version of Aaron Rodgers I'm going to get after the Achilles injury. And the thing that I worry about with the Jets is just this whole overly optimistic, like, manipulation that I don't know if this is what Aaron Rodgers is basically doing, because I know the Jets can be a damn good team when I can see it, because they went and got Alou Fashanu, who I absolutely loved, and he was one of my top 10 best prospects that I'm looking at in the next season. I think because he's a big body, but here's the difference. Go look at what Penn State did for Drew Aller last season with the protection he had. That was
running Tyron Smith too. Don't forget that.
Yep, that was a damn good offensive line you saw from Penn State. And then to add Tyron Smith, which, again, Tyron Smith, I know, is a veteran, but who knows how much gas he has left up in the tank. Now, if he solidifies that offensive line, you can make that case in point. But I just love this defense so much that I want to see this team succeed because, again, there is such there's a window of having an excellence on one side of the ball that this gets taken for granted and it gets wasted, man. This is not going to look good for the Jets at all. This is why I'm going to hold to see what I'm getting right now with Aaron Rodgers and that Achilles heel. But again, I could be with you as well with this if they could be an extra win type team. But I just think that this over-optimistic stuff and what Aaron Rodgers is doing off the field right now kind of is leaving my head in the clouds right now of just I'm in uncertainty right now.
Now, for this next one, I can understand if you want to hold, and I'll give you the reason why I think that you would have the mindset to hold. But I am going to go ahead and call. You had a team that won 10 wins last year that nobody ever thought would be possible coming off of a 2-win season the season prior. And the fact that they had Nico Collins on the roster for 3 years already, and he barely cracked 1,000 yards and wasn't looking at like a number one weapon. You bring a guy like CJ Stroud in there, and Nico Collins has already solidified himself as the number one option there. And now he's a number 2 next to Stephon Diggs, and Tank Dell is your number 3 option. And then if you want to go even further, you got John Mechie as your number 4. Then you bring in Joe Mixon this offseason, and you bring in Danielle Hunter on the defensive side of the ball, along with Derek Stingley Jr. and Jalen Petrie. And, now you're looking at a Texans defense that is a little bit more scary and the offense that has a little bit more firepower. If they had 10 wins with the roster that they had last year, I'm going to give them at least another 2 to make them 12 and 5 to end the season.
Well, I'll tell you what, my friend, I ain't holding back from this one because I'm going with you too. I'm going with the call up on this one.
I would only say hold because I didn't know your thoughts on CJ Stroud. If you were like, I'm going to hold because just in case that sophomore slump kicks in.
I just think with CJ Stroud and what he's been able to do, again, I think Bobby Slowick, what he's been able to do as an offensive coordinator, I mean, he got the best out of CJ Stroud. And I know what a lot of people are saying, regardless of this whole Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, whoever you would have wanted to take a quarterback, it didn't matter because the difference is Bryce Young had a harder card to deal with because of the organization he plays for, the amount of players, and the expectation of winning was different. Carolina did not have exactly the pieces. They were dealing with a mid to late 30 wide receiver in Adam Thielen, which doesn't really give me a whole lot. So at least with CJ Stroud, this is a young roster that's organically been built for the last 3 years. And man, their draft has been really, really good. You get Will Anderson Jr. as a double whammy pick. And then at the same time, I got Danico Autry, Danielle Hunter, Aziz Al-Shahir. And I mean, this team, what this is giving me is that this is a team that wants to prove they can compete with Kansas City. Now, that is very hard to really have that expectation. But again, I think DeMeco Ryans has definitely proved a lot of people wrong. And by the way, between him and Antonio Pierce, they're great player coaches. These are guys that players want to play for. And a guy that's familiar with this building, with what the Texans organization has gone through. But I think when you get a guy who has been a former successor in New England and what he's done now with this roster and in the past few drafts, the Texans are not a team to mess around with. But again, I see the point with the sophomore slump, but I think if we've learned anything from what CJ Stroud has done this past season, I think he's definitely has the ability to overcome adversity when it's thrown against him. And I think he'll figure out ways, and he spreads the ball beautifully. And I think that was part of Bobby Slowick's offense is that, again, you could add a Stephon Diggs, but it's not like you have to be overly reliant on Stephon Diggs as your offense.
Oh, yeah, and the fact that when Collins went down for a couple games, he was throwing to the guys the likes of Noah Brown, who had 150 yards, and 2 TDs in a game, and it's just insane. I do think that CJ Stroud, like being one of the most accurate quarterbacks in the league, and that was what he prided himself on coming out of Ohio State, was the accuracy. I think that if anybody's going to compete with Kansas City for that title, or for that, it would be either the Cincinnati Bengals, since they've already done it, or the Houston Texans are upcoming. Now, moving on to the Miami Dolphins, they got them at 9.5. Shocking here, I'm going to go hold. And the reason why I'm going to hold is because there's a lot of drama going on in that locker room right now. We don't know how much that's going to impact the Dolphins, because right now they're at a lock with Tua, at a standstill. Like he wants more money. They're not willing to pay him more. He's also lost a lot of weight, back to the weight he was when he got injured a lot. And that's what you're looking at. Not to mention they lost Christian Wilkins, a big player on their defensive side of the ball, to be that run stuffer up the middle. And like, they don't really have anybody except for Bradley Chubb and Jalen Ramsey and Javon Holland in the secondary that really scares me on that defensive side of the ball. If you're able to contain Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, you're able to shut down the Miami Dolphins. I don't really see them having the success that they did. And not to mention, you fell apart the last few games of the season. You were it had the potential to win the division. You finished 11-6 to end the season, and you finished on a 3-game losing streak and let Buffalo overtake you for the division. I am holding on the Miami Dolphins at 9.5.
Yeah, I'm holding on the Miami Dolphins as well at 9.5, because here's the thing that I take away from is, number one, this is a contract year for Tua, and you have to be brutally honest about this, because I have dealt with a lot of Tua defenders, and they're just like, Tua's great, Tua's amazing. Okay, but you didn't seem that sure when Brian Flores was your head coach. I can definitely respect Mike McDaniel and what he's done on the offensive side of the ball, because you are getting the best of the abilities for Tua. But yes, he's lost weight. The other thing is, too, I watched Jared Goff and I watched Trevor Lawrence go and get the bag and really shape up the quarterback market. So between him and Dak, that's where I really have to think about the quarterback market. I thought this year they were going to draw the line with Tua, because initially, if they were going to take a quarterback in this draft, I knew with where they were going to draw the line, because there are several teams that are basically have done this. They upgraded their offensive line for a few reasons, because there's question marks as far as how far can the quarterback get them. But the other thing is, yes, they've lost Christian Wilkins. They've lost Andrew Van Ginkel. Now, they did add Jordan Poyer, who I do think does bring experience in the secondary, and that's great and all, but I think the other thing is that they did add another pass rusher next to Jalen Phillips. And I think this is because Jalen Phillips, it's going to take a while until he gets back to his full season form, because after that Achilles injury, that's not good. And I think the Dolphins, I'm going to hold on, because
didn't Bradley Chubb get injured last year too?
Bradley Chubb got injured as well. And then this was another thing is that you're right. This was not a team that adjusted to the cold. But that's the thing is like I said, I feel like the Dolphins are that seasonal girlfriend that you would love to have a fling with for at least 4 or 5 months. But then once you're in the cold months, in the 3-4 months, and you can't adjust to that, sorry, but the Lambeau cannot deal with the cold. So that's where I'm holding with, the Dolphins on this one.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair. Contrary to popular belief, I am going to... This one is tough for me. I want to say hold, but I'll give them another win or two, because with a healthy Joe Burrow, we have seen what they're able to do and what they're capable of, going to back-to-back AFC championships, going to a Super Bowl, and losing Tyler Boyd and Joe Mixon are voids in the roster, but adding Jermaine Burton, keeping T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, keeping Zach Taylor, that play caller on that team, adding Geno Stone and a couple other defensive pieces was huge for them. But losing DJ Reader, one of the big run stuffers in the NFL, and in a division that's run heavy like that. Now their schedule is a little bit weaker than what the Browns, Steelers, and Ravens are. So I'm going to go ahead and give them a couple more wins, just because I think that they could pull it out with the roster that they have, the quarterback that they have, and the schedule that they got coming up.
Now, this might shock you and many people, but I am folding on the Cincinnati Bengals. And here's my reason for this. The problem I have with them right now is that secondary. They lost Chidobe Awuzie. They lost Jesse Bates a season ago. So my feeling is that because in the division that they are in the North, that you have the secondaries that can contain Amari Cooper and Jerry Jeudy, or maybe potentially Pat Freiermuth and George Pickens, and even, other wide receivers. I mean, can you contain a Miami? Can you contain, a Kansas City and a lot of these other teams? I love Joe Burrow. I really, really do. But I just think losing Joe Mixon as well, I'm not sure with what I'm going to get on that run game because, again, it's too much for me to really put my chips in to believe the Bengals had figured out some of this stuff. And, again, who's going to probably push back on this is our good friend Tim. But I'm being brutally honest with, the Cincinnati Bengals. I love Joe Burrow, but the secondary gives me question marks. And I think the run game, how efficient is that literally going to be, especially when you got to be battling in the trenches for this? I'm going to fold on the Cincinnati Bengals this year. Hard for me to say it, but I just think I
get it. Next is the Buffalo Bills. I am actually going to call on this one. 10.5 is what they got it at. I'll give them one more win to give them 11. A lot of people think that the Buffalo Bills, because of all the guys that they lost, it's really going to hinder them. It's going to, make it that much more difficult. But the guys that they really lost on the offensive side of the ball were only Gabe Davis and Stephon Diggs. And then you look on the defensive side of the ball, they lost an aging Jordan Poyer, an aging Micah Hyde, and an aging hurt Tre'Davious White that really couldn't stay healthy. And they had 12 draft picks that they were able to get this year for drafting back, and they filled all of those empty positions, including on the offensive line. But I think that you still got James Cook as your run game. You got Dalton Kincaid and Dawson Knox coming in that are still, and we saw what Kincaid was able to do towards the end of the season, how well he was. And then not to mention you got a 6'4" guy in Keon Coleman who may not be as good as what Diggs and stuff was, but he is going to be a serviceable wide receiver that's going to put up the numbers for you. And the it factor for this whole thing is the quarterback, because it's kind of like a Patrick Mahomes thing. If they did not have Josh Allen, I would have folded with them. But since they got Allen, I think that they could, match, if not raise their win total.
Yeah. Now, on the other hand, I'm going to hold on the Buffalo Bills because now I do agree with you. They needed to get rid of those old existing contracts, and especially with guys that were suffering injuries. I think this whole thing is because I think the contract that's really screwing them is the Von Miller contract. I think because the amount that they're paying for, and that at the same time the cap hit, it's probably one that if they cannot get this team going around, then that's where it's going to initially be a problem for Buffalo. But I do think 10.5 seems fair to me because I'm not doubting Josh Allen at all with the capability and the and just the amount of adversity he's really had to overcome. Because again, people think it's going to be easy for Aaron Rodgers or for Tua, to take this division. It's not. Okay, because many people think that, we're going to have a change in the division and all the rest of it, but it's not that easy compared to when you have a player who knows how to play in the month of November, December, and January. Okay, that's the difference maker. Tua fell flat. Aaron Rodgers, unfortunately, can't stay on the field for more than 5 minutes, and that was the hard problem. So if you're going to doubt Josh Allen right now, go ahead. Give me all your stocks. I'll buy into that because I think you get rid of a lot of these other players. They lose Stephon Diggs, which honestly, Diggs, they only lost, they only dropped 10%. They're still a playoff team. So what does that tell you? That tells you that they are vested in Josh Allen. They believe that him and Keon Coleman are going to be a very strong, tight fit together because you're not going to give a whole lot of complaints in this building. And then at the same time, what did we just see from Khalil Shakir late in the season? That kid's got speed. Yeah. He's got hands. So I'm going to hold on Buffalo. I think 10.5 seems about reasonably right for me.
Next thing we got the Baltimore Ravens at 11.5. Now, shocker to you, I am probably a shocker to you, but I'm going to fold on the Baltimore Ravens.
Ooh.
And here's my reason why. You got a Baltimore Ravens team that had one of the better defenses in the league last year, and if it wasn't for the Browns, it would have been number one. You lost one of your better safeties and your interception king with, I think, 5 or 6 interceptions last year in Geno Stone to your rival in the Cincinnati Bengals. You lost 3 more defensive pieces, not to mention you lost your linebacker coach, your defensive line coach, and your secondaries coach to Seattle, along with your defensive coordinator, which means that this team is going to take a dip on the defensive side of the ball in terms of that. Now, you can look on the offensive side of the ball. I don't think that Derrick Henry is going to have the production that everybody is expecting him to, because I still think that that's going to take away from Lamar's running and everything. And I think that if you have him drop back and rely on his passing more, you are going to expose him and everything. So he is not going to be as productive. And what has made Derrick Henry productive over the past few years is a boatload of carries every single game. And I don't think that if you can narrow it down to 15 to 20 carries and everything, and with this defense or this division and the defensive that they got, Derrick Henry's not going to be as good. And the last thing that's causing me to fold on the Ravens is they've got the second hardest schedule in the NFL. And the one that is the first is the Cleveland Browns.
Yeah, that's going to be hard for sure. I'm not going to fold. I think my thing with the Baltimore Ravens, I'm going to hold on them, because the defense that I have on the Baltimore Ravens is yes, defensively, it's a different look, because you lose Patrick Queen, you lose Geno Stone, you lose a couple of guys up on defense, and your defensive coordinator and Mike McDonald. But the thing is that Lamar, the takeaway is that Lamar is winning 75% of your games when he's on the field. You notice the difference and the change with the Baltimore Ravens on this one, because when he's not on the field, your win total drops down. So I think a part of that really does make up for it for the Ravens. Now, again, Kyle Hamilton and Justin Madubuike are your pivotal pieces in defense.
Roquan Smith.
Yeah, and Roquan Smith as well. So I think if you have those three, but then you start retooling and I think revamping that defense a little bit differently. Now, it might be a different defensive schematic from there. I think with 10.5, with what they are at right now, I'm going to hold on, because I still do think Lamar Jackson does make up for it for 75% of their wins. But I'm with you up on this one. If I see a change or a difference in this defense, I could kind of hold it a little bit suspect for the Baltimore Ravens next season.
Yeah, and that's kind of what has me on a fold/hold factor with them, is because of, we talked earlier about how much of an impact one coach can make. Yep. And the difference that they can make when it comes to one side of the ball. And we've seen defensive coordinators that you go from a top tier coordinator, and then the guy that takes over for them is mediocre at best. And we could see that potentially with the Ravens this year, is where we could see the defense going from top 1, top 2 in the league to middle of the pack right away. And I feel like that's the reason why, Lamar Jackson is accounting for 75% of your wins, but if your defense is also giving up more points and everything and making these games a lot closer, it's going to be a lot more difficult to stay in it. So, there it is. But now we move on to Kansas City. They got them at 11.5. I'm going to call and give them one more win. I think with the addition of adding Marquise Brown, giving Mahomes another weapon alongside Xavier Worthy. If Xavier Worthy, a lot of people don't realize he was the number one option at Texas and not Adonai Mitchell. And, he still got the hands, and he's the fastest wide receiver in the NFL, Xavier Worthy is. And if they use him like they did with Tyreek Hill, I think you're going to see a more explosive Chiefs offense and a similar Patrick Mahomes that you saw when he threw his 5,000 yards and 50 touchdown season that year, and it'll also take some pressure off of Travis Kelce. Now, yes, the loss of L'Jarius Sneed, you're going to take a big hit, but you got your guys back in Chris Jones, Trent McDuffie, and George Karlaftis and everything on that defensive side of the ball. And I think that with the offensive pieces that they added, that's why I'm going to give them one more win than they had, or than what they're projected to have.
Yeah. For me, I'm honestly going to end up holding on the Kansas City Chiefs at 11.5 because I do feel like they've got a target on their backs because they are trying to win 3 straight Super Bowls, which has never been done before at all. And I just think with Kansas City, I felt like they've had such a noisy offseason because guys are getting into trouble. They're losing Rashee Rice right now for an X amount of games. And I also do feel like, L'Jarius Sneed, you lose him. And I do love Trent McDuffie. I do think he's a very good shutdown corner. But I just think because the way that teams right now are outlooking the Kansas City Chiefs, they are trying to implement the same blueprint that they have. The other thing is that they are being targeted by many teams out there because they can't stand them. They know that this is a team that is obviously an evil empire, in my opinion, with the NFL and the league. So, which is why a lot of teams, they want to be better than them. They want to basically play to their extent. Now, there were 2 guys that these guys are such steals in the draft, and that's Jared Wiley, the tight end from TCU, and Jaden Hicks, the corner from Washington State. Those guys are going to be pretty impactful, which is what I think is very impressive for Kansas City to really kind of keep a grab on. But
they got Wiley?
Yeah, they got Jared Wiley from TCU.
Ooh.
Yeah. That's why I'm like, you have got to be kidding me. An offensive tight end that, a guy that I initially outlooked on a couple of drafts, that I think that kid, he's going to be interesting when he's ready.
He'll emulate Travis.
Oh, yeah. I think you're just gifting Patrick Mahomes another weapon in the future with, a tight end when Travis Kelce retires. So, but again, I just think because of the way that the strength is right now with the AFC, it's so hard right now because a lot of teams, they want to compete with them. And so I'm going to hold on the Kansas City Chiefs.
Kansas City does have one of the easier schedules, though. So
they do. They do. But like I said, there's a lot of teams that could be definitely knocking up on their door this upcoming season.
I agree.
All right. Call, hold, fold, guys. That was fun, at least for the AFC. And then the next one that we're going to have is the NFC. Because, again, I just think having clarity like this is so important with a lot of these teams because you and I have seen it. Every fan base right now is heckling. They're saying that one's better than the other. But here's the thing. When we come to the season, everything is on the line. Every game matters. And so having I think doing this was a lot of fun because at least we kind of understand with the outlook and what they are potentially going to be. But this is where it's going to get very, very, very interesting very quickly.
Yeah, and I'm very excited to see how this season turns out. And the first game of the season for us is going to determine a lot, playing the Cowboys on our opener. So,
yeah. Oh, I mean, man, I got the Chargers and the Raiders in week 1 at home. And I'm like, especially with the way that ended that season, oh, God. That's why I'm like, I'm loving this schedule right now with just everything in the NFL. But all right, folks, that's going to do it for Chase and I here up onto the show. But we appreciate you guys being here with us tonight. Special shout out to Zach Zeraris, who has been very, very great with all of his content with the Edmonton Oilers and New York Rangers. Absolutely loved him stopping by up here up onto the show. Show sponsored by BetUS. You go online right now to BetUS, especially with our prop bets that are going on. MLB picks, single and parlay leg bets. BetUS has you covered up on it. They've been the rock stars for 30 years right now in the betting market. Go online to BetUS.com. $50 into your deposit in your first one or more. 200% in bonuses and 30 risk-free bets. That's BetUS, where the game begins. And SeatGeek. When you're going to your next event, whether it's your favorite sporting event, get closer to your team, your favorite artist, and whatever concert venue that you decide to go to, or comedy shows, wherever, to get the best seat at the most affordable price so you don't miss out on the experience. SeatGeek has you covered up on it. Download it on your mobile device. You can play in the App Store at SeatGeek.com. Promo code SnakeSports for $20 off of your first purchase of your first ticket. For Chase and I here on the Snake Sports Talk Show, have a great rest of your evening, and we will see you guys on the next episode of the Snake Sports Talk Show. See you later, guys.
See you later.